Hello and welcome to May's Breaking Barriers LinkedIn Live, what I like to think of as your monthly dose of actionable insights and real life strategies aimed at EDI leaders, chief people officers, heads of talent, heads of HR, and brought to you by award-winning EDI consultancy Shape Talent. My name is Rachel Schofield. I'm a senior facilitator for Shape Talent. And joining me today is the brilliant Jane Funsale from Working Families. Hello, Jane.
Hi, Rachel. Lovely to be here.
Great to have you with us. And today our topic is all about working parents and carers. What is changing in UK workplace policy? I'm going to introduce Jane properly in a moment, but I do know that she's in Leatherhead, I'm in London, and we would love to know in the chat where you're joining us from. Do say hello. Let us know a little bit about where you are, perhaps where you work. We always feel a little bit out on a limb here. We can't see anybody. So if you want to put in the chat and say hello and give a little sense of who's listening, we'd be delighted. Even if you're watching on replay, always great to know who's on board. But yes, Jane Funsale has been leading Working Families since 2018, brings deep expertise from senior leadership roles across UK charities like Samaritans and SANS. She's a passionate advocate for equity of opportunity, deeply believes in the value of a balanced, fulfilling working life for individuals, for families, and for society as a whole. And Jane and I are going to be looking at what's new in UK workplace policy. You will have a chance to hear from us over the next 25 minutes, and we'll hopefully have a little bit of time at the end for questions. This will be about 30 minutes in total. So do use the chat. Let us know what's landing. Let us know whether you're doing some of the things that we talk about. And of course, any questions that you have for Jane, do put those in the chat nice and early, and I can make sure I put them to Jane at the end. Hello from sunny Bournemouth. There's Rebecca. Hello there. Great to have you with us. So before we dive into the real minutiae here, I'd love to get a little bit of an intro from you, Jane, about Working Families, the organisation that you head up. For anyone who's not familiar with it, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely, Rachel. You were kind enough to say that I was brilliant at the beginning. And of course, I also have to say that it's really the team that is brilliant. I was very lucky to inherit my role from my predecessor. So Working Families, our mission is to remove the barriers that working parents and carers face in the workplace. And we're the UK's national charity for working parents and carers. We believe in systems change, so we like to do that in three ways. We empower parents, we support employers. Sorry, I'm going to be pointing at people. I can only remember three things at a time. So, as I said, it's systems change that we believe in. So we want to empower parents, support employers, and use our research to influence policymakers. And it's all about flexibility. It's about being able to give your best at work and to do your best at home, being able to go to a sports day, knowing that you are going to commit to get whatever it is done that you need to get done. So we are all about making sure that parents and carers can be the best parents they want to be, and we know that that's what they want to do, and that they can be the best people at work. Everybody needs to work, everybody has to work. It's part of life, along with taxes. So it's really important that parents are able to do that in a way that doesn't mean that they either have to abandon their careers or their jobs or their earning potential or abandon their families. So that's really what we're all about.
Brilliant. And so it makes you the perfect person to guide those who are joining us today on the ways of UK workplace policy, what's changing, what people can be doing to support those in their workforce who are parents or carers. And I'd love to start with some exciting news, because recently we've seen the official launch of family-friendly workplace certification. This is in partnership with Working Families. So well done, first of all. But I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what the certification is, why it is such a big milestone for UK businesses and of course for working parents and carers.
Yeah, I'm delighted to talk about it. We are so excited to launch this. It's gone really well so far, and we hope it will get better and better. It is a practical framework. Family Friendly Workplace Certification is an accreditation. It's the first of its kind here in the UK. It's from an Australian model, and it's been working brilliantly in Australia for the last 4 years and has had some really great impact in Australia. So that practical framework helps employers assess how they are supporting parents and carers in the workforce, and most importantly, it gives them the recognition for doing it well. And it also helps them to see where there may be changes that they can make to improve. So it is all about celebrating what's being done well, supporting employers. I'm doing the finger thing again. So, so it's celebrating employers, supporting employers, and raising the standard. And it, of course, it's a fantastic flag for parents and carers to know that while this organisation may not be perfect, I doubt very many of us are, it is an organisation that is committed to doing the best that it can for everybody who works for it, particularly its parents and carers.
Yeah, I love that. So it's made me think of kind of B Corps, that kind of, it's made me think of blue flag beaches where people think it's safe to swim here. It's a good place to be. So tell us, for organizations who think, actually, we'd love to look at getting that certification, what are some of the criteria, the key benchmarks that organizations have to meet in order to gain this?
Well, the first thing, which we are hugely excited about, is that there is a self-assessment that organizations can do. You do have to pay for it, but it's the princely sum of £295. And that gives you an indication of where you are. How are your policies? How likely is it that you're going to get certified? And then you can have a report from us and a debrief about what are the changes that you might want to make? Where are the things that you might be doing brilliantly on and you can continue to celebrate and extend? And where are the things that actually you really do need to tweak the odd policy or have a look at raising standards?
Yeah.
So that is the cry. Do the self-assessment, and access to that's on our website.
Brilliant. And I know we're going to be dropping into the comments links to things like your website through today so people can follow up with this. And I just wonder, one of the things we talk a lot about at Shape Talent is the ideal worker model, the idea that we've adopted for many decades, for hundreds of years, the kind of typically the male breadwinner, someone who is always on, always available, prioritizing work. And that, of course, excludes so many people, particularly with caring responsibilities and in non-traditional family setups. So I wonder how this certification of family-friendly workplace can really challenge that outdated model.
It's absolutely fascinating. What we hear from so many working families that we talk to is that actually the way in which they wish to parent, the way in which they choose to share their lives, share the care, is being stymied by structural problems within the systems around them. So it's not that people don't want to share care. It's not that people don't want to parent in different ways. And it's not that everybody, including men, because traditionally we would think of the ideal worker as a man in a suit or a man in an overall who would be available from midnight to midnight every day of the week and wouldn't ever need to take time off, wouldn't need to go to a parents' evening or a sports day, and would never have anybody dependent on them who is ill in any way, so they might need to go and support. So for us, that's the biggest challenge, is that the systems that are around us mean that it's very difficult for people to make the changes that they want to make within their lives. And that's the beauty of the Family Friendly Workplaces certification, is that it is, as we said, that flag to people, but it is also about encouraging really good quality organizations to think about what is it that the people that they employ want to be able to do? How do they want to work? And of course, it's always an employment contract, so the flexibility does need to come from both sides. But we know from our employer membership that the employers that want to work with us and that we want to work with are attracting talent, are retaining their people, are promoting people internally, are getting kudos from the people that they employ, because they are able to say, look, this is how we do these things here. It improves culture. It strengthens leadership. So that idea that you are employing people who come with a whole set of stuff attached to them is one of the things about that family-friendly workplace certification that's so important. And that's so important for all employers who want to be able to be seen as good employers. And frankly, that's the best way to get the best out of the people that you are working with.
Yeah. So it sounds like a win-win in that it's going to make the workplace more friendly for parents and carers of all genders. And also it's going to be beneficial to employers who want to recruit and retain the best talent. And I wonder, you were saying it started in Australia and recently coming into being here. Are you seeing positive responses? Are you seeing early adopters doing interesting things here on the organizational side?
Oh, absolutely. So we've got two of our founding partners are Deloitte and TLT LLP, and they're doing absolutely amazing things. Deloitte have got 26 weeks paid parental leave for both parents, mums, dads, and partners, which is absolutely extraordinary. Now, not everybody is going to be able to afford that, but there are lots of things that organizations can do. One of the most important things that they can do is look at the jobs that they advertise them flexibly. Look at job design to see whether or not a job actually has been created to be able to be done in the hours allocated it. Because it's all very well if you want to do, for example, compressed hours or work part-time, but is the job that you're doing, is it allowing you to do that? So, that's one of the most important things. We are looking for organizations where flex is both real and accessible. So it's not good enough to say, this is what we're talking about. You might be able to have a day off in 2 weeks' time. It's about acknowledging that there are surprises and emergencies in everybody's life. So flex is real and accessible. And I'm doing the finger pointing thing again. I don't know what's wrong with me today.
It's a mental shortcut, isn't it? These are good heuristics. We need, what else would be again?
Exactly. And as a woman of a certain age, my memory is kind of dodgy. So we want flex to be real and accessible. We want line managers who are trained and confident. And we want employees who don't have to hide their caring responsibilities, being able to be taken seriously and giving promotions where that is possible. It's really important, the line manager situation. The Chartered Management Institute tells us that less than 20% of line managers have any training in people skills. So they've got tons of training in the gubbins of the work that they do, but not in managing the people that they're trying to manage. And we really want to see line managers being confident about understanding how flexibility can be embedded within their own teams and across their organizations.
I'm tempted to keep asking you about this, but I know we've got lots of other stuff to cover. But the certification, Family Friendly Workplace, can be found on your website. As I say, we'll drop that into the chat later. So let's park that one for now, although it's got me very excited, and talk about public policy, because working families, I know, played a key role in influencing the new Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Act that came into effect in April, so we're only a month on this year. So again, this is something that's really important for organizations to know about, to get to grips with. So for people who aren't familiar with this, what does this act mean for working parents and carers, Jane?
So I want to take it back first to that human level of new parents with a new baby coming home. Everything's lovely, lots of celebration. It all happened on time, no challenges at all. That's wonderful when it happens. That's absolutely wonderful when it happens. But for some parents, that is not the case. And they will be in a situation where they have a baby that has been born early and may need a lot of additional care, may need to stay in hospital. The mum may not be in the same hospital. The dad may be pulled between both mum and baby. So it's a really, really challenging time. There are lots of employers who have acknowledged this and have got some great support in place, but it is fragmented. So one of the most important things that's happening this year in our world is the Neonatal Care Leave and Pay Act. And I'm going to refer to my notes now so I get this exactly right. So it's a statutory entitlement which enables employed parents whose newborns require neonatal care to take paid leave. This will apply to babies up to 28 days old and provides a week's leave for every 7 full and continuous days the baby is in care for up to 12 weeks. So it really should be a game changer for so many parents, giving them the ability to have leave which is specific for this, as opposed to having to, for dads particularly, having to take chunks of annual leave. It's an exhausting and very difficult time for parents. Now, there's no charity that knows this better than Bliss. So we worked closely with Bliss, and we also worked with an MP called Stuart MacDonald. He's not an MP at the moment. And it was just the most extraordinary work to do collaboratively with all of these people, to really, for so many charities to come together to push that through. And we think it will make an enormous difference to parents who are in those very, very difficult times, just after their baby's been born, when it needs that additional care.
And it had me reflecting, as you were talking there, about the number of charities, campaigning organisations who are lobbying government on issues like this, including working families. Do you think that there is a growing momentum in public policy to recognise that life is complex? Modern family life has a complexity that perhaps we need to engage with. Do you think the policymakers are up for that?
Yes, I think they generally are, particularly when you appeal to them as human beings. My understanding is that Stuart MacDonald was chatting to a friend of his on a golf course. He's Scottish. And the friend said something to him about an experience that he'd had in his life with a neonatal baby. So it is that ability to go, oh, okay, that transcends politics. And certainly we found when working on this bill that we were able to get support across the House, which means across all of the political parties. So there was nobody going, oh, that's a terrible idea. Everybody really could see the benefit of it. The challenge, of course, with the legislation is that it's a blunt instrument. So as I said earlier, there were some organisations who were already providing this additional support for parents in those situations. But I think, we're getting a new employment bill. There will be some changes in there, which will be boosting the resources that working people can rely on. And there are ways of talking to people. All of us within the charity sector, we all have our roles to play in terms of getting the public and politicians to understand what the challenges are, and then working with them to get through the legislation that is needed. We very much, as working families, because we work both with employers and individuals and with policymakers, we're very much about having a tone of voice which calls people in. It doesn't call people out. So for us, that's really important.
No, sorry, were you going to give a for instance, do?
No, well, I was just going to say that the other thing that I wanted to make note of is that as an organisation, Working Families has some employment solicitors on staff. And one of the really important things that a couple of people in the team did, and I really do want to call them out for this, is that they made sure that the legislation wasn't unwittingly excluding people who were taking early maternity leave, or people who were on sick pay because of health reasons. So it's a tiny thing, but it has just broadened that entitlement, which is so important.
Yeah. The thing I was wondering about, because you said obviously you're working on behalf of working families, parents, carers, but you also are supporting employers. We'll have a lot of employers listening today. And of course, there's always that counter argument where employers, however much they want to help and support, and if you're the big boys like Deloitte, you probably think, yeah, we can fund this. This is not smaller organizations often get nervous. They sort of feel we'd like to help, but these kind of policies are hard, or they're going to make it difficult for our small team or whatever. I mean, I wonder what you say to perhaps smaller organizations who think, well, we'd love this certification, or we definitely want to make sure we are compliant with the new Neonatal Care Act and so on, but they get a little bit fearful, or they worry about the impact on their business.
Fascinatingly, 25 years ago, which I know is a long time ago, we did some research with small businesses, and we found that micro-organizations, those businesses that were employing less than 10 people, had no problem with flexibility because the employee understood the needs of the business and the employer understood the needs of the employee. So there was real flexibility and a kind of adult conversation happening, a human-to-human conversation happening between employees. It isn't possible for an employer to say yes to every single request that comes in. But there are all kinds of ways you can trial and test things. So if you have that person-to-person conversation as the line manager with the employee or as the employee with the line manager, if you bring that up, then it really is possible to see what is possible. What can we say yes to as opposed to what we can say no to? As Working Families, we're a small charity. We employ 30 people. We do not provide 26 weeks paid parental leave. It is not something that we can afford to do right now, but we do everything we can to provide as much flexibility as possible for everybody who works for us. And we do the best we can with our parental leave. So yes, of course, not everybody's family looks exactly the same. 2, not everybody's business looks exactly the same. So it really is about understanding what's vital, what must be done, and also what's nice to have. And as I said, the legislation is a blunt instrument. We also need organizations to lead the way. So if big business starts doing it, and if they can support people in their supply chain to start doing it, then there will be the incremental family and societal change that is needed.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions for Jane. If you have any questions, now's the moment to start putting them in the chat. You snooze, you lose, I always say, because otherwise we get to the end of our half hour. And what can sometimes happen is a little flurry come in and we run out of time. So if you've got a question or if you want to follow up anything Jane has said, then please use the chat and I'll keep an eye on that. But I've left almost perhaps the biggie till towards the end, which is parental leave. Because shared parental leave, the role of paternity leave, always hot topics, Jane. And I know that many families really struggle to make use of the current system. So I wonder what you think needs to change to really make parental leave more accessible, particularly for fathers, particularly for same-sex couples. Where are we in the big picture here?
So what we would advocate is, where it's at all possible, make your parental leave gender neutral so that it can be taken by parents of both genders, both parents, and single parents separately. I mean, very interestingly, in Australia, as an example, what Australia do is they have 110 days paid leave, which can be taken in any combination by both parents. And if you're a single parent, you get the 110 days leave for yourself, which is fantastic and obviously very much needed. The issue in the UK with shared parental leave is that effectively what you are doing is the dad is borrowing leave from the mother. And although it has a very small take up at the moment, probably around, there are arguments about it, but it's somewhere between 3 and 5%. What we find is amongst the employers who are Working Families employer members, because they understand the difficulty of trying to navigate your way through the system, there's a much, much higher take up because both parents can see the benefit of it. And it can particularly be used in situations where parents have access to paid leave, because obviously that is the gold star. When you've just had a baby, oddly, your expenses go up, not down. So it is vital that parents have that leave. In the UK, women can take up to a year's worth of leave. On average, people are taking 9 months, but women on lower incomes are taking less than 6 months because they simply cannot afford to be off work. And that is exactly true for men. So men are entitled to 2 weeks paternity leave, but it's paid at a rate that is negligible. It's paid at a rate of less than £9,000 a year.
Yeah.
and you only get 2 weeks. Now, recent legislation means that you will be able to take that in chunks. So you could take a week at a time. But if you think about, for example, women who might be having C-sections, either because it's been planned, because that's the best thing for them to do, or as an emergency, those women desperately need some support at home, and those dads really want to give them that support at home. But if they don't have the leave and they can't afford to take it, that is a real challenge. There's an extraordinary organisation called the Fatherhood Institute, which has been campaigning for dads being present in children's lives, and particularly around the time of birth. And then there's a campaigning organisation called Dad Shift. I don't know whether you would have seen them, but they put baby slings on all kinds of male statues. In them. I mean, it was just such a talking point. And of course, so many dads want to take that time. So yes, for us, it is really important that fathers get that time. We, as an absolute minimum, would want to see that those 2 weeks paid at 90% of salary, obviously with a cap. But in a perfect world, we're looking for 6 weeks of paid paternity leave, which we believe would be a game changer. Yeah. And the only way we're going to be moving away from the motherhood penalty and the gender pay gap is by equalising sharing responsibilities within families.
Yeah. And you make the very valid point that a lot of this is down to the challenges financially. But of course, we also see that culturally, attitudes in the workplace have often not supported the idea that men should take their paternity leave, that it's okay to go and be a dad for, even 2 weeks. And as we say, ideally longer. I mean, do we think that there'll be a shift, that we are starting to see it become more acceptable? Because for men, it's bold otherwise to have to say, yeah, I'm taking some time off, and what's your problem with that?
Yeah. We are seeing a change. And I mean, certainly with the rise of organizations like Dad Shift, there really is a push. And younger fathers are really saying, hang on a second, I want to be involved in this time with my children. It's vitally important to me. Having 2 weeks is an improvement on nothing. Hopefully having 2 weeks paid so people can afford to take it, again, will be an improvement. 6 weeks would be an improvement. And for those people who are lucky enough to work for an employer who gives them large amounts of leave, I mean, that's just brilliant. It's the beginning of a change, because, of course, having had the leave, what men then find is they want to be involved in the family life in a way that they maybe not have been able to do before. And that then requires flexible working. And sometimes that then is another point at which they really have to push through. One of the things that we think is really exciting is that leaders at the top of organizations, and that includes many men, are becoming real models. They are actually talking about why flexible working is so important to them as human beings, what it is that they're taking that time off to do. In the old days, if you hang your jacket over the chair and disappear for 2 hours, well, nobody'd known that you'd kind of gone to a school play or a sports day. One of the things that we really want, and there's another chap called Elliot Ray who talks about parenting out loud. Say, I'm going to sports day. Say, I'm taking my child to the dentist. Make those open statements about what it is that you're doing. So yes, I think there is going to be legislative change, but I also think it's much more of a societal shift, and that's what's going to push that legislative change through.
Yeah. And thanks to Sharon at Shape Talent and Viveka, who are both offering reflections on the Australian system, the Swedish system. So fascinating to see what people are doing around the world with parental leave. Just a question actually that's come in, because we're almost at time, and I'm going to ask you one final question in a moment, Jane, but just from Chloe, this was about how would the shared parental leave / paternity leave work for self-employed people? We've been talking about an organizational perspective, but as you say, often the devil is in the detail. Legislation can feel a bit blunt, and once we put more complex situations into the mix, it gets more difficult perhaps. And any thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, I'm not qualified to answer that question. Working families, the only advice that we can give is to people who are classed as employees. And there are a lot of people in the UK who just don't get access to any of this leave. However, if you email our Working Families website and ask our legal advice team, they will be able to point you in the direction of other organisations who may be able to help.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And a question from Viveka here. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Why do you think so much of the parental leave and working policies here in the UK are put on individual businesses and employers as opposed to being implemented as law? I was thinking that when it came to talking about sort of shared parental leave and things, that there's some companies who can afford it are doing wonderful jobs. Other people are left to their own devices, and perhaps government goes, oh, it's nothing to do with us, half of this. So what's going on there, Jane? I'm imagining a lot of it's to do with money.
Yes, but it's also to do with societal attitudes. The Nordic countries, everybody always lauds the Nordic countries about the extraordinary amount of parental leave that's available and the way in which they look after new parents. But of course, they do pay significantly higher taxes. And the issue with all of these things is that this costs money to deliver, which is why in the UK, as Viveka has pointed out, we do see this difference between those organisations who can afford to provide well-paid leave and those organisations who can't. In Spain, they are now offering 16 weeks of equal parental leave for mothers and fathers, paid at 100% of salary, and they're looking to increase that to 20 weeks. So a lot of it will be around cost. And that's why, for me, it's the societal shift. Government, until a couple of years ago, didn't see childcare as part of the social fabric. And now, with the amount of money that government, the previous government and this government, are investing in childcare, there is a real sense that actually this is a service that we all need as a society. So that, for me, I think is the change, is that culturally, as a country, we are different to the Europeans, neither better nor worse, but different. And that actually, if we want that legislative change to happen, then actually it's up to us to make sure that we encourage politicians to give us the leave that we deserve.
Thank you. Time has flown past. I have one final question. And by the way, if you still have questions for Jane or you're watching this on replay, please get involved in the chat. You can drop things in. We always keep an eye on the chat after the event. We will engage with you. I'm glad, Chloe, that gave you a pathway to follow up. That's really great. But Jane, as we are looking ahead then, give us one action, perhaps one action that you would love to see employers take in the next 6 months to really start to break down barriers for working parents and carers.
I'm going to give you two things, because one of them is for employees. So for employees to look at our legal advice pages to make sure that your organisation is doing the right thing, and also that you're getting what you need and what you're entitled to. And also for employers, we would love to see them, as I mentioned earlier, taking our self-assessment, which allows them to see where they are in their family-friendly journey. So that, for me, would be absolutely critical. And it's a really practical starting point for organisations that allows them to see what's the practical framework that we've got, how can they make changes, what changes might they make, and they may be small. You can be a brilliantly flexible employer, as Working Families is, without being an employer that can afford 26 weeks paid parental leave. So there's an enormous difference between the big boys, but also just being a decent employer.
Brilliant. Did you do the two there? Yes.
I probably did.
I was getting distracted by something interesting in the chat. It's my apologies. So yes, so I would just second that. So Jane, I know people can connect with you here on LinkedIn. If they want to follow up, they should go to your website. This is what I was trying to do in the chat, was to check whether we've dropped this in, but we will certainly be putting in your website. So if people want to explore the family-friendly workplace certification, if they want to get in contact with your legal support that you offer, that is all accessible to people, which is fantastic. So Jane Van Sale, thank you so much for spending half an hour with us on the Breaking Barriers series. We're so grateful for your time, really fantastic insights, and we have to keep pushing, whether we are big organizations, individuals, people who lobby government, people who represent government, for the kind of changes that can support the realities of modern family life. Jane, thank you so much. And it just behoves me to tell you to look into the future and say what is coming up with Shape Talent. We have 2 things for your diaries in this order. Yes. On Wednesday, the 4th of June at 10 o'clock UK time, we have a webinar, an hour-long EDI in uncertain times. My goodness me, we know things are changing. There are pressures on EDI. There are discussions about what it's going to look like in the future. So we will be speaking to 4 fantastic guests, reviewing the different pathways that organizations are taking as EDI is discussed, could say challenged, threatened, whatever word you choose. We will be tackling that with our panel of experts. So do look in the chat. You can register for that webinar on the 4th of June. And then our next Breaking Barriers LinkedIn Live is on Thursday, the 19th of June. That will take place at 10 o'clock. It's called Inclusive by Design, How Talent Strategy Can Protect EDI Progress. This is about really embedding EDI into talent, as perhaps the funding, the way that EDI is seen, becomes less of a standalone, about how it might be embedded into the wider talent strategy. And we'll be speaking to our CEO and founder, Sharon Peake, and also delighted to be welcoming Claire Stevens, who is UK Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at NTT Data. So do get those in your diary. That's it for today. As I said, my thanks to Jane. Great to have you with us. And we look forward to seeing you at either of those events coming up in June. Thank you so much for joining us. See you again next time. Bye-bye.